In the murky shadows of cybernetic legend, the name John McAfee looms large, a man whose life story reads like a suspense thriller. Yes, that McAfee. John's journey was marked by brilliance, controversy, and a relentless pursuit of freedom. John McAfee's life was a tumultuous odyssey, really, that blurred the lines between genius and madness, leaving behind a legacy as complex as the man himself. Welcome to Capers and Cocktails, a true crime podcast that doesn't take itself too seriously and gives you something to enjoy while you listen. The following content may be disturbing to some. Discretion is advised. If you're enjoying one of our themed cocktails, ensure you're of legal drinking age and have fun, but drink responsibly. John McAfee was born on September 18th, 1945 in Cinderford, Gloucestershire, England. He was born on a U.S. Army base to an American father, Don McAfee, who was stationed on the base at the time, and a British mother, Joan Williams. And because John was half British and considered himself as such, we're going to make a uniquely British drink that John may have also enjoyed himself during his many escapades. Although video footage I've seen at least pretty much just shows him drinking straight from a bottle, but more on that later. For our cocktail, we're going to take a 1 part gin, 1 part Pimm's No. 1, 3/4 part lime juice, and 3/4 part simple syrup, and add them to a shaker with ice. Shake those ingredients until they are well combined and chilled, and strain into a freshly iced glass. Garnish with a mint sprig and cucumber wheel if you are a fancy Brit or fancy Brit wannabe. For the mocktail, take 1 part non-alcoholic gin, 1 part lemon seltzer or lemon sparkling water, 3/4 part lime juice, and 3/4 part simple syrup. Add those to a shaker with ice. Shake, 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 strain, and garnish the fresh, refreshing drink with a mint sprig and cucumber wheel if you'd like. When he was a young child, John actually moved to Salem, Virginia, in the U.S. with his family. John's father worked as a road surveyor and his mother was a housewife. And apparently John had a pretty rough childhood, as his dad, Don, was known to abuse alcohol and was likely abusive towards him and his mom. John had to watch and listen to this happening. This gave John a fearful and traumatizing childhood, undoubtedly. When John was 15, his father completed suicide, adding another trauma to the list. John attended Northside High School in Roanoke County, Virginia, and was a 1963 graduate. He studied for his undergraduate degree in mathematics at Roanoke College in his hometown of Salem and graduated in 1967. He headed to Northeast Louisiana State College, where he started working towards his doctorate in mathematics. He met his first wife, Fran, around 1968 at the college. She was an 18-year-old undergraduate student, and I guess he was violating school policy or something because that relationship got him expelled. He had a daughter, Amy, with Fran, but he would end up leaving them both. His expulsion didn't really hold him back. He got a job right away working as a programmer for NASA in New York City, where he worked for 2 years on the Apollo program. He worked for several places as a software designer and a consultant, including Xerox, and he would eventually find his way to Lockheed, where in 1986, he read about a computer virus, and it really freaked him out. The brain virus, also known as Ashar, is considered the first computer virus for IBM personal computers. It was created by 2 brothers, Basit and Amjad Farooq Alvi. The virus infected computers by replacing the boots, it's complicated, but the boot sector of a floppy disk with a copy of the virus. The infected disks would show the label like the copyright symbol brain, and they contained a message indicating the virus's presence. The virus also slowed down the floppy disk drive and made 7 kilobytes of memory unavailable to the operating system. It's complicated, but basically it was a virus. Despite its notoriety, the Alvi brothers claimed they created the virus to protect their medical software from piracy, not malicious purposes. Okay, whatever. But either way, John was worried and also an entrepreneurial spirit. In just a year, he created an antivirus software that could detect the computer virus and remove it automatically. He created McAfee Associates Inc. in 1987 to sell the software that he named VirusScan. It was the first antivirus software in the market and one of the first software products ever to be made that was distributed over the internet. Apparently, his first goal was not to make a lot of money, but more so to raise awareness of the need to have protection against computer viruses. He did manage to make a lot of money, however, netting nearly $5 million a year for himself by 1990. Just 3 years after founding McAfee Associates Inc. By 1994, John sold all of his stake in the company and stepped down, having no further involvement in the operations that had his last name on them. And they would have his name on them for the next 20 years, until in January 2014, Intel announced a name change, which John was pleased with, saying, quote, "I am now everlastingly grateful to Intel for freeing me from this terrible association with the worst software on the planet," end quote. He evidently found the software annoying and removed it from all of his computers. Maybe as revenge, the business soon demerged from Intel and to this day actually still carries the McAfee name. John was involved with a lot of other tech companies throughout the 1990s, and in 2000, he bought a large property in Colorado and opened a yoga and meditation retreat. In the following year, he wrote 4 books on yoga and meditation. All of this is well and good, Jessica, but when do we get into the capers? Okay, let's do it right now. Because, as his first cousin Daryl Williams would say, quote, "But like everything with John, he got bored very quickly," end quote. Belize is a beautiful country on the northeastern coast of Central America. It has stunning natural beauty, including its beaches, jungles, and barrier reef. Belize offers areas that are more secluded and private, and the Belizean government doesn't exactly do a ton of extensive background checks on people moving there. So it's an ideal place for someone looking to escape, whatever that means for them. John relocated to Belize in 2009, buying a beachfront property on the island of Ambergris Caye. Everyone knew who John was. I mean, he probably didn't exactly blend in. He was also known to just gift people in power, like the police, with things like computers. But then John started having problems with his neighbor, 52-year-old Miami native Gregory Fall, who lived 200 yards down the beach. They were, for whatever reason, not getting along, as neighbors be doing sometimes, mostly over John's 10 dogs, which Greg did not like at all. Greg had a pet parrot that he loved that would literally be perched on his shoulder, and he couldn't walk around on the beach with John's loud, aggressive dogs always barking and scaring the parrot. Somehow, 4 of John's dogs ended up being poisoned, and John put them down by shooting them. And then, 2 days later, on November 10th, 2012, Gregory Fall was found dead of a gunshot wound to the back of his head inside his home. There were no signs of forced entry, and there was nothing broken inside. The police tried to find John to question him, in part because another neighbor had heard John yelling that he was going to shoot Greg the night before his murder. But when they raided John's home, he was nowhere to be found. He had gone into hiding. Fearing for his life, John evaded authorities for a while, even at one point burying himself in sand with a cardboard box over his head. He was terrified of being picked up by authorities, fearing for his life. Belize's Prime Minister, Dean Barrow, would say about John, quote, "I don't want to be unkind, but it strikes me that he is extremely paranoid. In fact, I would go so far as to say bonkers," end quote. Maybe he heard about the burying himself in the sand incident. His plan was to escape to Guatemala and then back to America. And after running all around Belize by car and boat with a girlfriend named Sam and 2 filmmakers from Vice in tow, they made it into Guatemala, but illegally because they hadn't gotten their passports stamped by Belize on the way out of the country because they got there by boat. The customs official would not be bribed by John, and so all of them got their passports flagged. The Vice guys at this time published a short blog entry entitled, "We are with John McAfee right now, suckers," that ended up having a photo with the geolocation data attached. Whoops. Who exactly are the suckers here? So again, they were on the run. Sam, the girlfriend's uncle, by lucky happenstance, was the former Attorney General of Guatemala. So they headed to Guatemala City to get their passports stamped. They made it to Guatemala City, where John announced publicly that he was seeking asylum. That was unsuccessful, and he pretty quickly got himself arrested for entering the country illegally. While detained, he claimed to have suffered 2 heart attacks, which he actually later admitted to faking to avoid deportation to Belize. Instead, John was deported to the United States in December 2012. The same day, he met a new woman, Janice. The thing is, after he came back to the United States, John became way more famous than he was before all of this. John announced a bid for president of the United States in the 2016 election under the Cyber Party, later switching to seek the Libertarian Party's nomination. He campaigned alongside Gary Johnson and Austin Peterson, ultimately coming in second at the primaries and third at the Libertarian National Convention. In 2020, he announced another presidential run, advocating for wider cryptocurrency use. At one point, John claimed that he had created software that allowed him to spy on anyone in the world. If anyone was going to do it, it would be the antivirus guy, right? I mean, maybe it was true. Some powerful people, John said, were trying to set him up because he had gotten lots of information about lots of powerful people. They, according to John, decided he had to be silenced. He believed the they was the Sinaloa cartel, and they were trying to kill him. The Sinaloa cartel is one of the most powerful and well-known drug trafficking organizations in Mexico. It is named after the state of Sinaloa, where it was originally formed, and it has been active since the late 1980s. The cartel is known for its involvement in the production, smuggling, and distribution of illegal drugs, particularly cocaine, also marijuana and meth, and apparently chasing antivirus dudes. John declared in 2019 that he hadn't submitted a tax return since 2010 and maintained that taxes were inherently unlawful. He said, quote, "I haven't paid taxes in 10 years. I will never, ever pay taxes again, and you shouldn't either," end quote. He identified himself as a prime target for the IRS. Yeah, probably because he hadn't paid taxes in 10 years. So he went on the run again at 74 years old. He grabbed over $1 million in cash, a bunch of wigs, a fair amount of alcohol and drugs, and a lot of guns. He sold all of his assets and headed out. John, some bodyguards, that same filmmaker from Vice, and 36-year-old Janice, now his wife, got into a yacht and sailed away. They were doing a lot of drugs and drinking a lot of drinks. The drugs were making everyone on the boat more and more paranoid. There is footage of them searching under beds and in the mechanical parts of the yacht, convinced there are people down there. It does not sound like a fun time. In July 2019, while his boat was docked at Puerto Plata in the Dominican Republic, John and his entourage were apprehended on suspicion of possessing ammunition and high-caliber firearms. Well, he got caught because when they docked, he walked out onto the front of the yacht packing heat right on his side, and then that somehow made them suspicious enough to search the whole boat. The detainees were freed after 4 days and after the authorities took away at least some of their guns. Probably a good idea since everyone was super high and paranoid. I mean, they were just waving their guns around. Eventually, John was somehow deported to Spain, which he managed to do using his British passport. John was arrested in Spain in October 2020 at the request of the U.S. Department of Justice for tax evasion. The SEC also filed a complaint against him, alleging he promoted fraudulent cryptocurrency schemes. In March 2021, John was formally indicted, and he remained jailed in Spain pending extradition to the United States, where he would be facing up to 30 years in prison. On June 23, 2021, John McAfee was found dead in his prison cell in Barcelona, hours after the Spanish National Court approved his extradition. The Catalan Justice Department stated that all indications pointed to suicide by hanging, a conclusion supported by an official autopsy. John's death sparked speculation and conspiracy theories, especially due to a 2019 tweet in which he suggested that he might be targeted for assassination. The tweet read, quote, "If I suicide myself, I didn't. I was whacked," end quote. Another time he was quoted as saying, quote, "I'm sorry, I'm not suicidal, my friend. If I go down, it will be fighting with my shoes on," end quote. His death drew comparisons to the circumstances surrounding the death of Jeffrey Epstein, another high-profile figure who died in custody under controversial circumstances. John's daughter, Amy, and granddaughter, who asked to remain nameless, released a statement upon their father and grandfather's death, saying, quote, "We are terribly saddened by the sudden and unexpected news of John McAfee's passing. He was undoubtedly a brilliant and talented man who led a remarkable but deeply troubled life that affected many people, in both good and bad ways. A tortured soul can manifest itself in many manners, and there is no doubt that his energy was contagious. Even though he may no longer be with us, his legacy will live on," end quote. John's lawyer and widow, Janice, maintained that there were no signs of suicidal intent, calling for a thorough investigation into his death. On February 13, 2022, a Spanish court officially ruled John McAfee's death as a suicide. On December 14th, 2023, his body was finally released to his family for repatriation to the United States for his funeral after being kept in a morgue in Barcelona for 2 years. It's unknown where his remains have gone to finally rest. A strange end for a strange, strange man. There are some who have speculated that John actually shot and killed his father as a 15-year-old, staging the scene to look like a suicide. He may have actually even admitted as much to a friend. John may have been a dangerous man from the beginning, and narcissism plus drugs and alcohol and basically unending access to money made him, as the Belizean prime minister said, absolutely bonkers. Who would have thought that the software that we've all had put on our computers, whether annoyed by it or not, was created by a man whose life story reads like a thriller? Was any of it real? Or was it all in his head? Does it make any difference? At the end of the day, maybe John wasn't the creator of the antivirus software, but the virus itself. Meanwhile, the McAfee company is now worth $14 billion. Thanks for hanging out with me. 2 cybersecurity adjacent capers in 2 weeks. Oh my, but they're very different, I think. Probably best to avoid taking the paths of either the Beagle Boys or John McAfee. But if you need something fun to watch, head to Netflix and watch Running with the Devil, The Wild World of John McAfee, a documentary that follows John through maybe the craziest part of his life in Belize. It's absolutely even more wild than I can even express or was able to convey, and it kind of humanizes John a little bit in a way that I think we can all appreciate. It's definitely worth a watch. Next week, another wild caper with a little less alleged murder. I'll see you in 2 weeks. And remember, there are always alternatives to, well, everything John McAfee did. Allegedly. Probably.